Meditation is used all around the world by many different people in many different ways. You might use it for a general sense of well-being to help calm your mind from stress and anxiety. But if you practice witchcraft or you're a member of the magical arts, you might carry out meditation as a way of quietening your mind before spells and rituals, allowing you to focus more efficiently, performing it before automatic writing or astral projection to aid in entering a trance-like state. You might carry it out to commune with deities, spirits, ancestors, servitors, familiars, guides, guardians, and everything in between, or you might simply carry it out as a way of connecting more deeply with your own sense of self. There are so many different ways that people use it, but equally, there are so many different reasons why people find it really, really difficult. And for some people, they might find it so difficult that they simply never practice it again. And so today, as someone who also struggles with meditation, I wanted to share with you some of my tips and tricks that made meditation easier for me. And so hopefully this will help anybody who wants to make meditation, if not easy, at least just a little bit easier. Before we go any further, let's talk about what meditation is, or at the very least, the way that meditation is most commonly used within witchcraft. As mentioned, many people all around the world will use it for many different reasons. But within witchcraft, we're primarily focusing on the stilling or quietening of the mind. It allows us to turn the dimmer and the volume down on the things that are going on inside our head. The things we need to think about, the things that we need to cook for dinner or the chores that we need to do, the deadline that we need to hit. By dimming all these things, we allow ourselves to better focus on the things that we achieve without distractions. But it's also what makes meditation so difficult for so many people. But if so many people are successful with their meditations every single day all over the world, why is it that so many other people seemingly struggle with it to the point where they simply give up? The answer to this is very much twofold. On one hand, everybody's lived experiences are going to be different. If you are neurodivergent, have chronic fatigue or pain, struggle to sit in one spot for a long amount of time, have a loud, busy household, or have lots of pressures on your time, you're likely going to have a harder time than somebody who doesn't experience these things. Also, I think a lot of people have misconceptions surrounding what meditation and mind calming is and what is required of them, and this often puts them off. They feel like they have to be sitting on the floor in an uncomfortable position for long periods of time, potentially hours on end, listening to nothing but silence. And this can seem really unachievable. I know that I definitely couldn't manage meditation like this. And it's really about finding a way to make meditation work for you, not the other way around. So firstly, I think it's really useful to dispel some misconceptions, because a lot of people, myself included, didn't want to start meditation because of the misconceptions. I always thought that I would have to sit in total silence, and that is something that my brain just does not like. I like having noise, and if I don't have noise around me, I'm often the one making it with random sound effects or random sound bites of audio clips that I've heard on the internet. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this. And so I suppose first up, it's about saying that meditation doesn't have to be this. It can be very flexible. There are so many different ways to meditate, some of which we're going to go into today. You can do breath work with your meditation. You can walk with your meditation. You can do other things like staring into candle flames as you're meditating. You can listen to things. It doesn't have to be as rigid as we perhaps perceive meditation to be if you aren't practicing it yourself. The second thing is that meditation is not the be-all, end-all to everything in life. I know that so many people tout that meditation and yoga are two things that are going to miraculously fix every problem in the world. And the simple fact is that they aren't. And especially when it comes to witchcraft, a lot of people will say that you have to meditate really well all of the time to be able to have a successful magical practice. And that just isn't the case. Now, I'm not going to say that meditation and mind calming can't be beneficial to magical practice, because it definitely can be. You can improve things with meditation that you perhaps would struggle with otherwise, but that doesn't mean that you cannot be a witch and you cannot practice magic if you aren't able to meditate. It simply isn't the case, and it hasn't been throughout history either. While today we have access to so many resources, we have access to the internet and so much knowledge, people in the past didn't have this. And so individuals would often be doing things that worked for them in their magical practice, and meditation was not something that was carried out on a regular basis by individual people in, say, the early modern period, when we see the witch trials really coming into effect. People might have had their own pre-working rituals, things that got them into the right headspace for spells and rituals, but everybody around the country wasn't sticking to a rigid meditation timetable. It just wasn't done. Different people did different things to suit them, and you can do that too. So for anybody who's just starting out on their magical journey, meditation, beneficial, but not a requirement. The third thing I think it's really important to bear in mind is that meditation is not something that you're going to be able to master instantaneously. Some people are definitely going to have an easier time than others with it though. A little bit like any skill that we pick up, some people are going to pick it up really, really quickly, and some people it might take years, even decades. And that's because it takes some real skill, and it also involves a lot of variables. You might not be feeling 100% one day, or there might be construction work happening outside. Your puppy might be really needy, or your child might be sick, and so you're going to be really struggling to meditate on days like this. Some days you just might not be feeling it. Maybe you have really bad cramps, or your chronic fatigue is flaring up, and so you're really struggling. Meditation is not going to be an instantaneous thing, and you're also going to have really good days and really bad days. I know that I have weeks, sometimes even months, where I struggle just to sit down and focus on my own thoughts, let alone try to quieten them. And so I think it's really important to remember to give ourselves grace. And then also in this is the idea that meditation is not something that you're going to be able to pick up over a weekend or a week if you're really intensive with it. I know that some people have the idea that if you do something for really large blocks of time, you're going to get better at it a lot quicker. But in reality, meditation is something where you're probably going to be better off doing it little and often. Now, I'm sure that there are some people out there that have had great success having a week where all you do is sit and meditate, and all of a sudden you're a meditation master. But for the majority of people, that's going to be overwhelming. You're likely going to get frustrated at your inability to be perfect at it. And ultimately, you might find yourself just giving up because it's not worth it. So instead, if you're starting to practice meditation or you're struggling with it, I want you to focus on little and often. I'm talking 2 to 5 minutes every single day, or twice a day if you can manage that. You might want to do 5 minutes every couple of days. Fit it into your schedule as best as you can, but try to do it little and often. Ultimately, meditation needs to fit around you, and it needs to be sustainable. So do whatever you need to do to make sure that you can fit it in consistently. This could be scheduling it into your day, or it could be doing it randomly. Have a couple of minutes at 6 a.m. while everyone's asleep, do it then. Have a toilet cubicle all to yourself on your lunch break at 12 o'clock, do it then. Need to be doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning because you're wide awake and you don't know what else to do, it doesn't matter, do it then. It's all about being consistent, because when we go months without doing something and then we pick it up again, that's when we get frustrated because we feel like we're making no progress. One of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to meditation is a lot of people will talk about it as though it's so easy, as though turning your thoughts off is just totally effortless, and they often describe it as being a singular thing. At least that's the way that I was always taught meditation. I was told that you just sit down and you be quiet and then you just empty your mind. And I would ask really annoying questions like, how do I empty my mind? And yeah, but then I'm thinking about emptying my mind and now my mind isn't empty anymore. Or if I'm sitting in silence, my brain starts making up little tunes to sing along to, and then all of a sudden I'm focusing all on the tunes and I'm not actually not thinking about anything, and then I spiral. And a lot of people will also experience what I like to refer to as the mind-calming panic. And this is where, when they sit down and they try to get into this headspace, they feel really, really uncomfortable. They don't know what's going on. They start having this like panic attacky feeling. They might start breathing quite heavily. They feel so uncomfortable, they just have to get out of there, and they will pull back from that meditation and they will go and do something else. And this is because meditation is not as simple as just sitting down and emptying your head. There's a few steps that go in there, and a lot of people will have 1 or 2 of these steps that might make them kind of uncomfortable, but they don't necessarily register it as part of the whole. So if you're only going to listen to one bit of this video, I would recommend it being this one, but please do stick around for the rest of the video. I promise it will be worth it. So to start with, I don't want anybody to be jumping in and trying to do meditation in one go, straight out the gate the first day that they do it. Instead, I think it's really important to break down the process into its component parts, and doing it little and often, a few minutes every day consistently over the course of, say, a week for each of these different components, so that we can figure out what we feel comfortable with and what we don't, so we can better adapt it to our lives and our practice. So firstly, it's about getting comfortable with silence. I'm not talking about emptying your mind. I'm not talking about silence inside your head. I'm talking about silence in the environment that you're in and seeing how comfortable or uncomfortable you are with different levels of silence. So for this, you don't need to be sitting still. You can be moving about and doing things, but just don't distract yourself with other things. So no TikTok, no music, no TV, no movies. Try to be present in as quiet an environment as you can. Now, I know that for some people, this is never going to be total silence, but just try to make it as quiet and calm as possible. This might be in the early hours of the morning or late at night. This might be right as you wake up before everybody else in the household wakes up. And just try to spend some time, 5 minutes or so, without having any kind of noise distraction as much as possible. If you want to wear earplugs, you can wear earplugs, like loop earplugs if you have them. You can use noise cancelling headphones, just don't have any sound on those headphones, and just see how comfortable you are with 5 minutes of not hearing anything. And then repeat this for an entire week. Do you grow increasingly more uncomfortable as the 5 minutes go on? Do you find that it gets easier for you as the week progresses, as it's just a case of practicing and getting used to it? Some people live their lives with background noise all of the time, and this is often done for a reason. So if you find that you're really, really uncomfortable with silence, we're then going to have to adapt the meditation technique to suit what makes you comfortable or not. But if you're fine with silence, then you can be a little bit more flexible with the way you meditate. You might want to do it in silence, you might want to do it with noise. That's going to be a personal choice. Whereas if silence makes you stressed, then that's something that we're really going to have to address. After a week of having 5 minutes of silence a day, we're now moving on to sitting still. Now, this is something that some people are going to find really easy and some people are going to find very, very difficult, even painful. You don't have to be in silence for this, though if you want to, you can add on the previous exercise to kind of build it up, or you can take it slower, do 1 week of silence, 1 week of sitting still, and then combine the two together in the following week. During this week, for 5 minutes, we're going to be putting ourselves in different positions. I know some of you just went dirty with that one, but no, bad. That's not what we're talking about today. And try and just be there and not shuffle. This is going to be so difficult for some of you, but this is the point. We're figuring out what we feel comfortable with and what we don't. And you're going to have to make this work with what you feel able to do. Obviously, different people are going to have different physical limitations. So one day, try lying down. Do you fall asleep by the end of the 5 minutes? If you do, then maybe that's not the way to meditate. But if you find it really comfortable, that could be the way to do it going forwards, but still try a different position. Sit up in a chair with your feet flat on the floor. Does this hurt your back? It definitely hurts mine. So then the next day, you might want to be trying something else. Maybe sitting on the floor, leaning back against a wall. Maybe you need more cushions around you. Maybe you need to be sitting with your legs tucked underneath you, or in a really strange position if that's what you feel most comfortable with. This is really the trial and error stage. So if you have one position where you're so uncomfortable, you're in so much pain, don't repeat it again. Instead, it's about finding a place where you're going to feel comfortable sitting for 10, 15 minutes at a time, and then you might want to increase that as your meditations improve. If the problem that you have is less physical discomfort and more the desperate urge to shuffle around and to fidget, then I do have some techniques for that later on that we're going to be talking about when it comes to implementing it into the meditation. But for the purposes of this, try and go as long as you can, and then try to find a technique that allows you to fidget. This could be twitching your toes, this could be gently rubbing your legs, this could be using like a fidget device that is not going to be overly distracting. So you want to be doing it, but not actively focusing on doing it. And then try again. Try those same positions with a fidget device. Are you able to sit for longer? Very much about figuring out what you can and can't do at this stage. Now, the next one we're going to do might seem kind of strange, but we're going to be spending 5 minutes a day focusing on our breathing. This is the one that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and it's because it's something that we do automatically. We don't try to focus on our breathing, and so when we do, it's happening to me right now, you start having to manually breathe, and it can be such an unsettling feeling. I hate it. I hate the feeling of manual breathing. Okay, I'm going to try and not focus on it, but the problem is when you try and not focus on something, you focus on it even more. Meditation often comes with the idea that we're going to be focusing on certain styles of breathing. I've spoken about it before. You might be focusing on the in-between breaths. You might be focusing on box breathing or elemental breathing. There's so many different ways of doing it, but focusing on breath is often really important. And yet it's the one thing that can make people super duper awkward and uncomfortable because it just feels so wrong. We shouldn't have to be focusing on it. And so some people just refuse to do it for that reason. For this week, we really want to be trying different styles of focused breathing. So this could be belly breathing. This could be box breathing. So belly breathing is when we're breathing all the way down into our belly. We're expanding our belly out rather than chest breathing, which we do up here. A lot of people breathe up here, whereas you need to be breathing all the way down here into your belly breathing. So it's a much deeper process of breathing. It's a much more purposeful process of breathing, and it can allow us to relax and calm down and enter into trance-like states. It can also make you feel really, really uncomfortable while you're doing it. So it's one of these things that we really want to be practicing outside of active meditation because it can take a while to get used to. And then the box breathing that I just mentioned is where you breathe in through your nose through a count of 4. You then hold for 4. You breathe out through your mouth gently for 4. And then you hold for 4. And then you repeat the process. This is commonly used for anxiety relief in people that are having panic attacks. It's also commonly used in meditation techniques as well. Now there's other forms of breathing out there. You can focus on the in-between of your breath. So you're breathing in, and then you need to focus on the bit between the breath in and the breath out. And it can make you feel kind of lightheaded and floaty off, but this is really useful for entering into trance-like states. Try different breathing techniques for meditation. There's lots of videos online. I've spoken about it in videos before, so I'll leave them linked up here in the little top corner if you are interested. And try different ones. You don't have to do it in silence. You don't have to be doing it sitting still. You can if you want to, though, if you want to build on the previous exercises, or you can extend it out over several more weeks so that you're building things up more gradually. Ultimately, you just want to be practicing this breathing every day for 5 days. If one technique makes you deeply, deeply uncomfortable, move on to a different one. We don't want to be giving ourselves negative associations with aspects of this, because once we build up those negative associations, we can often build up a lot of anxiety, and that's going to make it really difficult to progress onwards and have success with it. So try different techniques, see what works well. You can also add in some imagery for those techniques, which I've spoken about in previous videos, which might be useful. So for instance, if you're belly breathing, you might want to be visualizing. Visualizing is essentially daydreaming. It's seeing something in your mind's eye. So when you read a book and you're experiencing the story, or before you go to bed or on a long car journey when you're creating up a storyline, the way that that appears to you is your version of visualization, and that's going to be different for everybody. So you might want to be visualizing or imagining yourself blowing up a balloon and then letting it go again. For box breathing, you might want to actually be seeing a little ball go around the edge of a box for the different breaths that you're doing. So you might see it go up and then across, and then down, and then across. It's called box breathing for a reason, so that we can then have something mental to picture. This is going to be really useful for moving on to the next step, which is visualization. Now, visualization doesn't have to be a part of meditation and mind calming, but it can be incredibly useful, especially if you're going to be using guided visualizations, or you want to be creating servitors or communing with deities and spirits. Visualization can be quite beneficial. Now, as I just mentioned, visualization is going to be slightly different for everybody. Now, I think one of the biggest misconceptions with visualization is that you are always going to be seeing something in your mind's eye, but that's not the case. Think of visualization, as I've already mentioned, as however you experience daydreams. When you were a child and you were imagining someone running alongside the car, a lot of us did that. I know it's not just me. However that came to you is your version of visualization. When you're reading a book, how do you experience that story? Is it you experiencing the emotions through the narration that your brain is doing? Are you visually seeing that story as though it is a movie? Can you see things in bright color, or is everything mentally black and white? It's going to be very, very different for everybody. So think about when you're lying awake at night and you're imagining a storyline, you're writing a book inside your head. How does that appear to you? Or if you're in the shower and you're reliving a conversation you've had with somebody and you're changing the things that you said because now you have a way better comeback than what you had a minute ago, however that is coming to you is your version of visualization. And this is what we're going to be practicing. So for 5 minutes, for an entire week, you can either go and look at some visualization techniques online. I'll leave mine linked up here and in the description box if you do want to check that out. Do a little visualization. Follow along to somebody else's visualization, or you can just picture a flower growing out of soil, or the leaves turning orange on the trees. You might want to be recalling a conversation you've previously had, or perhaps having a mental conversation with a celebrity or a book character. Whatever works for you. Every day you can change it up so you're visualizing something different for an entire week, just so you can get an idea of how it feels. And then you're going to want to start connecting things together. Do the things that you are fairly comfortable with. Don't push yourself into anything super uncomfortable yet, because we're going to be finding workarounds to the things that we had difficulties with. So if you want to sit still and visualize, sit still and visualize. If you want to be in silence and visualize, be in silence and visualize. If you want to be sitting still and doing your breath work, you can do that. If you want to really push yourself, do your breath work and your visualization at the same time. That's arguably the trickiest one to combine because they often cross over into one another. These are really the foundations when it comes to having a mind calming and meditative practice. And if one of these things makes us deeply uncomfortable, it can rock the entire boat and make it really, really difficult to do anything. So, what do we do if we find things really, really difficult in this part of the practice? So if you're finding silence really, really difficult, you can put on some background noise. This could be binaural beats. This could be meditation music. This could be a lo-fi playlist on YouTube. This could be something like a guided meditation, which we're going to be talking about in just a minute. Some kind of background noise so you feel less like your head is going to explode, because that's what silence does to me sometimes. It can also be music that you really enjoy, but it needs to be something that you're not going to be tempted to sing along to or mouth the words to. It needs to be something that can just blend into the background, but stop your brain from feeling like it's going to explode. If you struggle sitting still, then you might want to be trying different positions, see what resonates with you, see what feels good, or you can always rhythmically walk. So this would be walking backwards and forwards, this could be walking in a circle, this could be meditative walking, which we're going to be talking about later on in this video, trying different techniques whilst practicing everything else. If you struggle with the breath work, I often find that distracting with other things is really, really useful. So rather than feeling the overwhelming need to control your breathing in a very stressful way, instead you could be focusing on the voices in a guided meditation, or background noise, or shuffling around with your hands and fidgeting and doing something. Breathing is one of those things where when we're in a quiet state of mind with no distractions, is something that you're probably going to end up focusing on. So it's about little and often building up your tolerance to experiencing your own breathing whilst also offering yourself distractions. Essentially, we're going to tone down the discomfort as we carry it out. And with visualization, it isn't a make or break when it comes to meditations. It can be beneficial, it can be useful. It's all about working in the constraints that you have. So don't expect to be able to see an entire movie as though you're literally sitting at the cinema, because that's not realistic for the majority of people. Most people's visualization is somewhere between experiencing the emotions of a story that they're reading about, but not actually getting any pictures, through to being able to see things in color in their mind's eye. It's very often somewhere in this sliding scale in between. And so a lot of people feel as though if they're at this end of the scale, where they're experiencing the emotions of a story without seeing it, that they are therefore not visualizing. But their visualization is just going to be different. They're experiencing the emotions of a story that's being told through narration, whereas the people at this end of the scale are experiencing the emotions of a story because it's being played out visually in their mind. It's just different ways of visualizing. Some people are more narration heavy than others, whereas some people are more visual heavy. And so it's really just going to be about adapting to make it work for you. And especially if you want to do guided visualization and guided meditation, being at this end of the scale is totally fine. When we read books or when we hear books, we are experiencing the emotions as though we are experiencing them ourselves. It really doesn't matter whether you have that mental picture or not, you're going to be getting the same emotional, energetic effect, and that's really the bit that's important. And then once we've figured all of this out, all of these component parts, we're going to take it all, we're going to gather it together, and we're going to start forming a meditative and mind-calming practice that we can actively implement and hopefully start having success with. And this is kind of the perfect time for me to talk about today's video sponsor, Aura. Now, of course, we can all carry out meditation and mindfulness by ourselves, but sometimes it can be really useful to have a little additional help. And Aura is a mindfulness and meditation app. Think of them as the Spotify of wellness and meditation. They have so many different categories, but the ones I really want to be focusing on today are their guided meditations and their sleep sounds. They have so many different real people offering their voices for guided meditations and visualizations. So you can find the perfect person with the perfect story to follow along to aid in your meditation. I find that the sleep sounds are particularly beneficial. The rain sounds, for me, no brainer, love them every time. They help to drown out the noise, the background noise, the tinnitus, and they really help me to settle into a meditative state. But of course, you can also use these for sleep too. They also have a range of meditation courses, so if you're a beginner, you can get started by following their courses too. Now, of course, Aura is more than this. They offer CBT and life coaching. They offer general topics on wellness, different podcasts, and there's no adverts, which is fantastic. There is nothing worse than being halfway through a guided meditation and all of a sudden there's an advert that is twice as loud as the audio that you were already listening to. And so if you think you would get some benefit from it, Aura are offering the first 500 people who click the link in the description box a free trial and 25% off their membership. So with that being said, I want to say a massive thank you to Aura for helping my meditation and also so many other people's. And let's talk about combining everything together, because this is the point where we're going to start smushing things together Frankenstyle. I meant to say Frankenstein style, but you know what? Frankenstyle, and finding something that really works for us. And I'm going to be throwing a whole bunch of techniques that I've tried, techniques that I've heard other people having success with, and let's try to find something that works for you. Hopefully. Fingers crossed, we'll give it a go. So the next step up from all of these things that we've already been practicing is limiting our thoughts. This is the bit that tests a lot of people. So once you've gone through all of those little practice sessions, this is the bit that might get kind of frustrating. And it's because thoughts are something that we are really, really good at. And we're also really, really good at focusing on them. So for instance, if I were to tell you to not think about strawberry milkshake, I can guarantee you just thought of a strawberry milkshake. And if you have more willpower than I do, if I were to play you a little tune, I'm sure a lot of you finish that tune in your head, and I will finish it because otherwise it's going to frustrate me. Okay, there we go. There's the end of the tune. We as human beings are pre-programmed to listen out for things, to be paying attention to things, to have loads of thoughts going on all at once. We're essentially trying to balance our lives and juggle it, and that is our default setting. And so trying to turn that down is really, really difficult. And one of the biggest misconceptions of meditation is that people believe that they have to turn it off. And I want to say now, you don't have to turn your thoughts off. That's basically impossible for most people. Instead, what we want to do is allow them to pass us by. Now, I've done whole videos on this before, so I'm not going to go super duper in depth. I'll leave them linked in the description box. But the goal here is to allow our thoughts to just pass by and to not beat ourselves up or get really frustrated and annoyed at ourselves if we get it wrong. You might have already noticed this happening when you've been sitting in silence or doing your visualizations. You'll get a distracting thought come into your mind and you might then start focusing on it. And when that happens, it can break our concentration, it can break the calmness that we were experiencing, and then we get all annoyed and we stop doing what we're doing because it's not working, I'm too distracted. The goal here is to learn to allow that thought to come in, acknowledge its existence, and then leave again. It's so hard to not have the thoughts come in the first place because we have lives, we have commitments. You have a homework project that's due on the 15th, or you have a deadline at work and you know you have to be up early, or your kids have homework that they're going to have to finish and you haven't done any research to help them with it, or perhaps you need to go food shopping and you're running out of time to go food shopping. These are all really valid thoughts. These thoughts are really important. They help us manage our life and we can't just expect them to go away. But what we need to be doing instead is to acknowledge them coming in and then let them go again. For instance, I need to cook food at 6 p.m. for the kids when they get home from school. Okay, I'll note that, I'll make sure I'm done by 6 p.m, let it go. Rather than, I need to cook food by 6 p.m. when the kids get home. What do I need to buy? Oh my goodness, how long am I going to take to cook it? Wait, I don't have cheese. I need to go and get cheese. Wait, but the shop doesn't have any cheese that they like, so I'm going to have to go to this other shop. Oh my God, I'm now spiraling. That bit is the problem. It is when you latch onto that thought and you allow it to spiral out. So we need to be practicing, and this is something that is going to take time. So give yourself grace with this. Thought comes in, acknowledge its existence, thought goes out again. And this is why doing meditation and mind calming in short bursts is really useful, because over the course of an hour or 2 hours, you might have 50, 60 thoughts coming through your brain. If you are latching onto all of them and getting frustrated at it, you're going to be setting yourself backwards. Whereas if it's like 5-6 minutes and a thought comes in and you latch onto it and you can't seem to let it go, that's totally okay. Give yourself a break, come back at a later point and try again. It takes time. It's like reprogramming, especially if you're like me and you're an overthinker, to not overthink every thought that comes into our head. It's really, really hard. And so this is all about giving yourself grace. It's about practicing the attention that we give to these individual thoughts. So I use a technique that I like to refer to as the etcher-sketcher. Not everybody is going to resonate with this, but here we go. I'm going to throw it out there anyway. If I really seriously can't shake a thought whilst I'm doing any kind of visualization, a ritual, when I'm trying to astral project, when I'm doing mind calming, whatever it is, if there's a thought in my brain that I genuinely can't get rid of, I will just shake it out a little bit. And I have to fix that again now, but it's fine. I will just sort of etch-a-sketch it out of my brain. And this can be a physical thing. This could just be like a little body shake that you do. It could be something that you do like this, like you're getting rid of that thought, just as a way of kind of snapping yourself out of it. Because especially if we're trying to sit like dead still, we're all inside our heads. And so sometimes I find that a quick, sharp physical movement can help kind of dislodge these thoughts so that I can let it go and move on. Alternatively, if you're more into writing and stuff, you can literally have a notebook next to you. Just write down that wayward thought. You've written it down now. You now know that you can come back to that at a later point. You don't need to be thinking about it right now, so then you can let it go. Trying these different techniques. I mean, that's also useful later on for automatic writing, but we'll get onto that. Just to try and limit how much you're focusing on things. So now that we've kind of done all of the gradually increasing in difficulty steps, let's bring them all together. So the first way to bring them all together that I would recommend are guided meditations. So guided meditations are when you'll have somebody talking you through the process. So this could be them talking you through the breathing that you have to carry out, or my personal favorite is when they take you on a little mental journey. You are essentially putting everything into practice here, because you can be walking around while you're doing it, but a lot of people choose to lie down or sit. You are going to be listening to not much other than the audio that's coming through headphones or perhaps is being played in the room, and you're going to be practicing your visualization, your breathing, your sitting still, your everything. So the guided meditations usually start by dropping you into the process. They will walk you through a doorway or down into a cave or through the clouds into a different place. And then you will go on this little journey, and it's really going to allow you to test your skills. You want to be focusing on what you're listening to, and you're going to want to be visualizing as best as you can, or following along if you can't visually see anything, the journey that they're taking you on. And if a thought comes in, you just let it pass you by and go, no, I'm focusing on this, and that's okay. I'll come back to you later. If you need to write it down, write it down. If you need to shake your head, shake your head. Whatever you need to do. Be in the position that is most comfortable for you. You can use your fidget devices if you want to. You're going to want to put all of the things in practice for the duration of the guided meditation. Now, with guided meditations, I would typically recommend finding somebody whose voice is tolerable, because you do not want to be forcing yourself to sit through a meditation with somebody whose voice you hate, or like an AI generated voice that just sounds so fake. It's just so awful. You want a real person. Try and find different people and see what you resonate with. Try different settings. So some people really love like real world settings. Like they love being like in a forest or in a cave. totally cool, totally fine. I personally really love the ones where I'm in a fantasy world. I absolutely love those ones where they like take you to go and see mermaids, or they take you to like a dragon's lair. Like those ones really suck me in. It's about finding something that you can really focus on, especially at the start, if you want to try with a topic that's really interesting to you. So for me, it's fantasy or it's the bottom of the ocean. Two very different things, but those are the extremes that I'm working with. For other people, they like just ones where they're talking you through the breathing. No fantasy world involved. They just want to talk you through the breathing. Whatever kind of guided one works best for you, start with that, and then start getting less and less interesting. Because the goal here is to test ourselves. It is to get to a point where we know that we are going to be able to follow along, even if there's external distractions. So try different times of day, start at night and then move into like the middle of the day where it's quite busy, or an evening when your kids are running around, or feeding time for your animals where they're being fed and they're barking and you're in another room. Try making it increasingly difficult. So find somebody whose voice you really don't like, find a topic that just doesn't interest you, and see if you can still follow along and practice it over the course of several days. So I would say at this point, you're probably going to want to be doing a couple of guided meditations a week, and then add in your other techniques kind of dotted around. Now, in the long run, you can use guided meditations as an active part of your meditative and mind calming practice. But they're not going to be good for everything. So guided meditations are better for general mind calming. So this could be before spells and rituals. You want to get yourself into a calmer state of mind. They're also really good before bed, when you're particularly stressed and anxious, when you feel overwhelmed, and also when you want a trance-like state or astral projection, because they're going to get us into a calmer point where it's easier to separate out the astral body from the physical one. If you want to be connecting with your psychic abilities, or you want to be doing things like automatic writing, then guided meditations are perhaps not the best, because what you're writing down is going to be swayed by what you're listening to. You can, however, find guided meditations for certain deities and certain types of spirits. And so it's almost a step towards journeying, which is kind of a different practice. Again, it's kind of another layer onto it, where you are able to then enter into an environment that has been mentally created to be accommodating for particular deities and spirits. And so you can then commune, say I would commune with Brigid or Ceridwen or Ceranos through this kind of process. So it might not be the best for these kind of things, but you can definitely work with it to fit what you need. The next style is one that I would recommend for anybody who really struggles to sit still, who finds a lot of discomfort or pain with sitting still, or really enjoys just getting out into nature, and that is meditative walking. It's my personal favorite style of meditation for what I mostly use meditation for. This I will recommend for connecting with guides, ancestors, spirits, deities, your own subconscious mind, as well as psychic abilities to answer questions. That's primarily how I use it. This one I wouldn't necessarily use as a way of calming, because you do need to be present and aware in that space. And I also wouldn't use it for things like divination or automatic writing, because it's going to be kind of difficult doing automatic writing while you're walking around. Walking meditation is exactly as it sounds. You are meditating as you walk. And instead of thinking of it as being completely shut off from the physical world, instead think of it more as being a part of you is somewhere else and the rest of you is still present. So you're still aware of your surroundings, you still know what's going on, you can still have a conversation with people, but there's a part of your mind that is focusing on something else. And this is best when you don't have anywhere you have to go. So you aren't aiming for a destination at a deadline. So this wouldn't be, say, walking to work or walking to a doctor's appointment. Instead, this would more be a route that you can pre-plan that is perhaps circular in nature. I really enjoy circular routes for this, where you are able to walk at your own pace, which is probably going to be pretty slowly, and you can just think. Now, I really love thinking. Some would say I am an overthinker. Actually, everybody I know would call me an overthinker. And so it's really great if you are one of those people, because it gives you some way of thinking towards a goal. You aren't just thinking for the sake of thinking. You aren't just thinking to ruminate. Instead, you're thinking for the benefit of achieving something. And so with this, I would be walking in a safe place, at a safe time, as much as possible. I know that some locations are going to be far safer than others, so do always make sure that you are keeping yourself safe to the best of your abilities. You can walk with somebody else, just let them know what you're going to be doing. And then as you're walking, which is probably going to be a fairly slow pace, you want to be focusing less on getting somewhere and more about your surroundings and what's going on in here. We're going to want to be thinking about a question or thinking about a topic. And as you're thinking about it, you're going to be reading the words out inside your mind. You might see them in your mind's eye. You might just be speaking them over to yourself. You might want to be repeating it. And as you're doing this, you might have guides come through to you, deities come through to you, and they might offer you information, solutions, images, colours, etc. as you go. If I'm thinking, say, about work, I might be thinking, what video ideas should I be coming up with at the minute? What should I be doing right now? Where do I need to go with this? And then as thoughts come in that are, what are you going to have for dinner? You have to feed the dog. You are going to be saying, okay, I acknowledge that, but right now I'm not thinking about that. And you let it go as you continue to focus. And then you might have another voice in your mind from a guide. It might just be divine inspiration, some might say, where you will just get an answer to your question like this as you're walking around. It also gives you the ability to add in divination at the same time, because you might get signs, you might get symbols, you might get augury, bird divination. You might get the answers coming to you on a number plate or a bumper sticker or a sign somebody has outside of their house that's going to give you the answer to your question. And you might have just been guided down that road just through divine inspiration seemingly and got the answer to your question. It's my favourite form of meditation because I walk a lot. I really enjoy walking, and so it allows me to add it into a pre-existing thing I already have. And if your home is really busy, very loud, lots of children, pets, neighbours, then this kind of practice might be really beneficial because it allows you to get out of where you are that's very loud. What I will say though is I wouldn't necessarily recommend any kind of guided audio visualization whilst you're walking unless you know 100% that you are going to be able to stay focused on your surroundings. I typically recommend headphones out, so no noise, we're listening to our surroundings because we are already partially distracted by something else in the act of meditating or mind calming, and so we really want to be focusing every other sense that we have on the world around us to keep ourselves safe. Now, kind of feeding into this is what I refer to as labyrinthine walking. Now, that might sound super duper complicated, but there's two main ways that you can do this. And this is pretty good for people who really enjoy moving and they find sitting still really uncomfortable. And it's also good for people who really enjoy doing and fidgeting with their hands, super beneficial. So the first way is to create some form of labyrinth that you can walk on in your own back garden, for instance. It could also be in your living room. You can use sand for this purpose. You can use sand from a specific place if you wanted. You can use chalk, like children's chalk, to draw it out. We want a classic labyrinth. I will put one on the screen here if you do kind of want to follow this as a guide. Now, labyrinthine walking has been used for a very, very long time. And it's a way of inducing a meditative, a trance-like state so that we can gain answers to questions. And this technique is really good if you want to include in audio. So if you struggle with silence, you can use a guided meditation at the same time or background noise as you're doing it. So in your back garden, on your living room floor, however you can lay this labyrinth out, you need it to be big enough for you to be walking around. You are going to be repeatedly walking that labyrinth. You don't need to do it quickly. We're going to want to be doing it really slowly, walking around. You can be thinking of what it is that you need answers to psychically. You can be communing or requesting that your deities or your guides come through to you. You can be listening to a guided meditation, listening to background noise as you're doing it, so that you are actively moving, doing something with your body whilst you're doing it. And this repetitive action is trance-inducing. So this is really good for people who want to be entering into a trance-like state, or planning on communing with spirits afterwards, or planning on entering into astral projection afterwards. This kind of trance-like repetitive walking is really good for that, and that's what it's been used for. There's some evidence to say that the walk in Glastonbury up to the top of the Glastonbury Tor was actually a labyrinth, and that people would walk it as a way of gaining answers to their deepest, darkest questions and the things that they had problems with in their life. So you can do it physically. You can also do it whilst you're sitting down, just with something that's in front of you. So there are things that are known as labyrinth stones. They are usually made out of something like slate or some other kind of stone. And this is where a labyrinth has been carved into the surface of that stone that you can sit and you can follow with your finger. Similar principle, you are talking about a repetitive action. You can do it with your eyes closed. You can be listening to your audio narration of whether it's background noise, whether it's music, whether it's a guided meditation. You can be sitting and you can be following it along. This is really good for people who do struggle with mobility but still want this repetitive trance-like motion. You can be following it along with your finger. Once you're done with one route, you then go and you do it again. And you follow it back round over and over and over again. You're going to follow this. Now, you don't have to be getting stones like this. You can make them yourself out of clay. You can also draw them on a piece of paper. But for this, you're going to have your eyes open because otherwise you're not going to be able to know where it goes. Alternatively, you can create something texturally. So you might want to be scoring that paper, like indenting it, so that you can feel it a little bit like you would with Braille. Or you might want to be taking a piece of paper and like punching holes as you follow that labyrinth around so that then you can follow the raised bumps on the other side of the paper. Just make sure that you do the labyrinth the way round that is backwards to what you want when you're punching the holes through from the back, but it allows you to follow the labyrinth that way. That's a very repetitive, trance-inducing, very good for going into astral projection kind of a technique. Now, if you want to get into something like automatic writing, there's a few different ways you can go about getting into this that are slightly different than just sitting there in silence. So really, you're going to want to have a fairly big piece of paper, maybe a notepad, on your dominant side with your dominant hand already holding a pen or some other easy to use drawing device. I wouldn't recommend something like a fountain pen or an ink where you have to like use a quill. It's just too much faff. You need to be moving very, very freely. So you need a pen that's very free flowing. It's got a lot of ink in it. You're not going to run out. The pencil's not going to wear down, that kind of thing. I'd recommend just a cheap biro. To be honest, they're cheap, they're easy to find, they're super accessible, and they last for ages. And then you're going to want to be sitting somewhere fairly comfortable. This could be cross-legged on your sofa. This could be lying back, as long as you are able to write. You might want to be listening to some music. This could be binaural beats. This could be drumming, especially is really useful for this kind of thing. Inducing trance, drumming is really good, especially if you can get drumming that starts quite fast and then you want it to drop down till it's in kind of in tune with your heartbeat. And then you want to take it even slower. That way you're kind of lowering yourself into a trance-like state. If I can, I'll find some of my favorites and put them down in the description box if you do want to check them out. So you can do this. You can listen to something that's designed to help with automatic writing, that's designed to drop you into a trance-like state. If you want to be doing automatic writing with a deity, you might want to be using music that is related to them, whether it's music that is about them or music that is from the region that they are from or the time period that you resonate most with them. So play around with things and see what works. And you're going to want to start doodling. So with your eyes closed, you're going to want to start just drawing random things on the piece of paper. And then as time goes on, you're going to likely find that you'll start doing kind of squiggles, and then squiggles might turn into like a legible word. And you're not going to be looking at it. The goal here is not to be paying any attention to what you're doing. You can acknowledge it, and this is where that like letting the thought come in, letting the thought go out kind of comes from. Because you're going to want to acknowledge that you're writing things down, but then not hyper-focus on it. Just be like, oh, this is happening. Okay, moving on. Just allow yourself to do it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, set a timer. Once the timer goes off, thank whoever it is that you have been connecting with, and then you're going to want to raise yourself back up again. So you're going to want to be tapping your feet. You're going to want to be increasing the energy levels again to bring you back up again, having some food, having some drink, and then looking at that piece of paper to see what came out from it. And this is one of those techniques that I would do with all of them, actually, but I'll get on to kind of the aftercare at the end. But then one of the other ways that I find is quite beneficial to do meditations if you struggle with it is to be focusing on something. So this is what we do when we say we're going to meditate on a card, like a tarot card, or we're going to be meditating for the benefit of gaining answers about a particular person, a particular situation. We're going to be meditating on something. This is where we're only focusing on that thing that we're going to be meditating on. And that can be really difficult. So if you struggle with this, I'd recommend having a physical representation for what it is you're going to be meditating on. So for instance, if you're meditating on your relationship with somebody, this could be like your family members. How is it going to go in the future? Like you want your psychic energy to be coming through and giving you some information. Then hold and look at a photograph of your family or the names of your family members written on a piece of paper. And you might find that as you kind of drop into that state, names might be highlighted as being of particular importance, or specific features or people in that photo might feel as though they come more to the foreground. And this gives you something to focus on so that the thoughts aren't being distracted by other things. You can do this while working a labyrinth. You can do this while using your fingers on a labyrinth or by using a fidget toy. Totally fine. I would say in this one, though, guided meditation is not going to be it, because you need to be focusing on what it is that you're actively looking at. A lot of people will do a tarot card reading a day or an oracle card reading a day, and then they won't know what to do with it. So if you want to practice your meditation, take that oracle card, take that tarot card, use that as the focal point. This is what you're looking at in this meditation. Have a look at that card. What is standing out to you? What is not standing out to you? Because that could be equally as important. If there's one color on that card or one little image or symbol that you are just like not paying any attention to, have a look at it. Why? It might be something that is being minimized in that day while other things are being brought to the foreground. See what comes out, because this can really help grow your psychic abilities as well. Is there particular sounds that you're hearing that kind of come out of nowhere? Particular colors that stand out to you? Are you getting information from a guide at the same time that you can be implementing? So many different things that can come out of this, but that is one way of kind of distracting yourself whilst you are trying to get into this meditative state. And really, for all of this, you're going to want to be setting a time limit on it as well. So I wouldn't recommend doing like guided meditations for like an hour a day, because that's not super sustainable. I also wouldn't recommend going on exceptionally long walks every single day of the week, because that also isn't sustainable, and it probably is also not going to be super safe, especially if you're going on the same route every single day. Instead, it's about trying different things and mixing it up as well, because repetition, whilst really good for practice, also gets super boring. And when we're not engaged in something, we're less likely to do it. So try mixing the techniques up, trying different methods. If you are in a beautiful meadow, for instance, and the sun is shining and it's just a lovely day, instead of doing a guided meditation, listen to the natural world and try some labyrinthine or some walking meditations. Or if it's really, really cold outside, try making your own labyrinth and see how it works. I have always found that the best way for me to have success with my meditations is to not be traditionally meditating. I still struggle with the sit down and be quiet kind of meditation. Just doesn't work for me, and that's totally fine by me. It doesn't have to work for me. Instead, I find other things to be far better. And then once you're done with it, you're going to want to be making sure that you're getting yourself back to where you were before. Especially if you're doing these meditations to enter into a trance-like state, for astral projection, you're going to want to be raising yourself back up again afterwards. Otherwise, you're going to feel kind of out of it, and then you might not want to do it the next day because you're going to feel uncomfortable. So the way that I was always taught to get out of meditations, it's probably going to not be much of a problem if you're doing labyrinthine walking or classical walking meditation, because you're already mostly present anyway. But if you're not, then it's about wiggling your fingers. It's about wiggling your toes where possible. I know that not everybody's going to find this easy, but just doing some movement if you can get away with it. Even if it's just doing a little bit of a shimmy, even if it's just moving your hands a little bit, do whatever you can. You're going to want to be listening to something else, doing something else, having a conversation, talking out loud. I find to be incredibly beneficial, especially if you've been in a guided meditation for 20 minutes, an hour, talking. Use your words, really, really grounding, really, really useful. You might want to be doing some grounding and drawing up some energy. Eat something, have a drink, get yourself moving. I find this to be really useful for centering myself back in my body again and making myself feel real, because especially when you've been doing it for trance or astral projection, you can feel kind of floaty-offy, and we don't necessarily always want to be feeling this way. So that's kind of the aftercare that I would give for any kind of meditation that isn't already quite active. And then generally, trial and error it. If somebody online has the most obscure way of meditating and you fancy giving it a go, give it a go. As long as you're staying safe while you're doing it and you're keeping yourself secure, give it a try, because so many people struggle with meditation to the point where they never want to give it a go. And while of course it isn't an essential part of magical practice, it can open avenues to trance work, to astral projection, to certain spells and rituals, communing with deity, communing with spirits and familiars and servitors, all the way to things like automatic writing that are not impossible to do without meditation. You can certainly do them. They become easier with some kind of meditative or mind calming practice. I know this has been a massively long video, but it's something I really want to talk about because I always thought that I was broken. Everybody else that I knew was meditating, or they were going to classes for meditation or something, and I felt like the odd one out because I couldn't do it. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it, it was that I wasn't doing it in a way that made sense for my brain and the way that I work. And so I would love to know if you have any tips that have massively helped you. If you could leave those down in the comment section, that would be absolutely fantastic. If you have enjoyed this video, please give it a like. It means a lot to me. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them down in the comment section. And if you enjoy the magical content on this channel or in this video, if you could give it a subscribe, it would mean so much to me. I post new content about witchcraft every single week. And with that being said, I hope you're staying safe. I hope you have a marvelous magical day and a fantastic time in your mind calming journey. And I will see you in the next video. Okay, bye!